In a Milwaukee shed so small that ambition had to stand outside and wait its turn, William Harley and Arthur Davidson began building motorized bicycles and behaving like men who had not yet learned the danger of optimism. Their first machines were simple, stubborn, and loud in the way only early inventions can be loud, as if they knew they were changing history and wanted everyone within 5 blocks to pay for it. By 1903, the little company was official, which in practical terms meant the garage had become a temple and the neighbors had become unwilling believers. In 1907, they built a factory, and in 1909, they introduced the 45-degree V-twin engine, a design so distinctive it sounded less like transportation and more like a bar fight with rhythm. It became the heartbeat of the brand, and also the reason people across America began to associate motorcycles with freedom, attitude, and the faint smell of gasoline mixed with destiny. Then came the big years. During World War I, Harley motorcycles carried messages, people, and enough military seriousness to make the company look indestructible. In the 1920s, the brand spread across the world. Racing made it famous, and dealers appeared in faraway places where people likely had to ask how to pronounce Milwaukee before ordering one. During World War II, Harley built the WLA for Allied forces, proving that even machines designed for rebellion can be drafted into patriotism when history gets dramatic. After the war, the open road returned wearing sunglasses. Highways expanded, motorcycle clubs multiplied, and Hollywood discovered that a leather jacket on a Harley could communicate more than pages of dialogue. The Wild One helped turn the motorcycle into a symbol of rebellion, which was convenient for Harley because people love posing as outlaws while quietly obeying traffic laws. Models like the Hydra Glide, Duo Glide, and Sportster gave riders something dependable enough to trust and stylish enough to brag about. By the 1950s and 1960s, Harley had become less a machine company and more a lifestyle with chrome trim. Then the story took a less glamorous turn. In 1969, AMF bought the company and immediately increased production, which is corporate language for making everything faster until quality started writing complaint letters. Japanese competitors arrived with machines that were lighter, cheaper, and more reliable, a humiliating trio if there ever was one. Harley struggled through the 1970s, proving that even legends can wobble when the road becomes modern. But in 1981, the company was bought back by its own executives, which was both a comeback and a family reunion with invoices. Harley focused on quality, identity, and the idea that owning a motorcycle was not merely transportation, but membership in a very loud church. The Evolution engine in 1984 helped restore reliability, and soon rallies like Sturgis and Daytona turned Harley culture into a traveling festival of chrome, denim, and carefully cultivated swagger. In the modern era, the company faced new problems. Older customers, newer rivals, economic storms, and riders who wanted electronics instead of just engine noise and a leather fantasy. So Harley adapted. It built touring bikes, improved suspension and braking, and even ventured into electric and adventure territory with machines like the Pan America and Livewire 1. Some traditionalists reacted as if the brand had announced it was moving into ballet, but history has a habit of mocking people who think change is betrayal. Today, Harley Davidson remains a symbol of American freedom, brotherhood, rebellion, and the glorious noise of refusing to be subtle. Its legacy is not just in motorcycles, but in the culture built around them, from films and rock music to custom shows and roadside legends. More than a century after a few friends started experimenting in a shed, Harley still rides the same strange line between tradition and reinvention, proving that a machine can become myth if it is stubborn enough and loud enough to be heard over everyone else.